So the question was, what is the Orthodox view of ecumenicism? So let me first by just explaining the word, because that's a specialized term. So the word was introduced as a way to speak about Christians of different traditions speaking in a friendly, understanding fashion with one another. And it comes out of an old Greek word that we actually use in the Orthodox Church quite regularly. So ecumenical refers to the world, specifically the civilized world, the world that let's put it in its original context. It was the ecumene was the Roman Empire. That was the ecumene, the world that we care about as Romans. That was sort of the perspective. So you have the ecumene, and then you've got like those wild barbarians out on the borders and remote areas, strange places far away that maybe we have some trade with, like they knew about places like, China and India and things like that. But for practical purposes, the world was that area that was around the Mediterranean and going up into parts of Europe and so on. And that, at a certain point, became kind of formalized into this understanding of the responsibility of the church. And so the Patriarch of Constantinople became known as the Ecumenical Patriarch because he was the patriarch in the capital of the ecumene of the Roman Empire, Constantinople. This is made for some of you. You think like Rome is the capital of the empire. It was, but then later on, Rome kind of fell into troubles, and so Constantine set up a second capital that eventually became the only practically speaking, capital of the empire, Constantinople. So anyway, that's where this word is coming from. It's this idea of the world that you're having a conversation with. All right. So this then gets applied to this thing that had been done before in various ways, where there were these dialogues happening between Protestants and Catholics, Catholics and Orthodox, Protestants and Orthodox. Like, these things had happened, but they were not sustained. It wasn't something where it was an ongoing conversation. And in particular, there were some idealists who were thinking that if we just had more conversations, that everybody would understand everybody else better, and that there would be unity in the world. That if we understood each other better, we would come to a common understanding of the faith, and so out of this would come Christian unity. So that was the vision of the idealists who were trying to organize this, and it became known as the ecumenical movement. So it was like 19th century. Notably, this is especially true in British, among British Christians of various sorts, also in America. Those were kind of like the central actors in all this. They were really wanting to have these fresh conversations. There were like lots of new, much better scholarly research about the history of Christianity. Christianity had gone through some pretty tough times over the last 1,000 years, and a lot of things that had been common knowledge before had basically been forgotten. And this was especially true for Protestants, that they'd come in a very particular context that was arguing with a very particular, with the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, in a very particular point in its history. So the Catholic Church was, culturally, spiritually different from where it had been 500, 1,000 years before, and quite different from where it is now. And so that was what Protestantism reacted against. And as Protestants were getting to know Orthodox, in many cases they were like, oh, this is something that we have more sympathy with. And there was like these ideas that maybe we're really all just the same faith. We just haven't been talking enough. Among the Orthodox, when these conversations began seriously happening, so you had like people visiting, spending time, asking questions, sharing ideas back and forth in the 19th century and the early 20th century, there was actually a fair bit of openness and willingness and even some hope that this could actually lead to some good ends. In general, the Orthodox Church has always had the perspective that, it is the inheritance from the apostles, and it has the fullness of the truth, which is not to say it is the exclusive proprietor of truth, but it has the fullness of truth, and that out of that it should share. And so if people are interested, we should share with others. When these conversations got to points of trying to confer legitimacy on this or that, Protestant denomination, that was never something that Orthodoxy was going to do, because we don't understand the church the same way. So, like, there's, Protestantism basically has a presumption in it that the church is not especially an organic thing. It's not like there's like the general idea is that there's like the visible churches are all just particular instantiations by particular individuals and communities of this mystical church, which is this invisible reality that's the unity of everybody in Christ. That's the general way that it's explained. There's obviously can be nuances from particular versions, but that kind of an assumption that there's like the real church is the invisible church, this mystical church that maybe we belong to. That doesn't really work with Orthodoxy. With Orthodoxy, we have very concrete things, like they're very specific inheritances that we have in terms of teachings, practices, things. Like we have books and treasures and people's bodies and so on that are things that we've received from the apostles and the heirs to the apostles, generation after generation after generation. So we have like this like family history. It's like there to be found, and so somebody coming in and saying we're another branch of the church. That was not something that really the Orthodox Church was ever going to accept on its own terms, as saying that there are these other branches, and so you've got like this. This is the Lutheran branch and the Calvinist Presbyterian branch, and the Orthodox branch is this one. It's like we really can't be honest to who we are and accept that vision of what the church is. But that being said, there was this real, say, talking about like the 1920s, there was a lot of optimism round about then. This is when the World Council of Churches starts to really take on momentum, and there are other really interesting collaborations among different Christians, especially among students. So there's a lot of very interesting things that happen among students. And so and then there's some interesting things that come out of this, that Orthodox Christians actually, through the help of Protestant and Catholic scholars, learned a whole lot more about their own faith. It was really, really kind of you just have to think about the time frame that I'm talking about. So the Ottoman Empire just collapsed, which had been, to greater or lesser degree, oppressing and limiting churches within its boundaries for like 500 years. And well, on the flip side, the Russian Revolution has just begun, which definitely was not a net positive for Orthodoxy. But that had been Russian Orthodoxy had been the only group that was free to just generally practice their religion. The Romanians had a little bit of independence, but a decent amount of independence, but were definitely under pressure from their Ottoman overlords. And everybody else was under one empire or another that was very much restricting Orthodoxy. And Orthodox education, Orthodox clergy, the quality was very poor in general at that time. And so there was actually a lot of benefit from having scholars that were like translating, discovering historic treasures of Orthodoxy and sharing that with everybody, including the Orthodox Church. And so over the course of the 20th century, there was just frankly a lot of relearning various aspects of our own tradition. So there were things that had been carried on very well, very strongly, but sometimes without enough context. And sometimes only in certain areas, like certain monasteries would have a great depth of knowledge, but then everyone else would have no knowledge of that, because they didn't have like lots of publishing houses and things like that to be able to share. So that was a helpful part. The other interesting, really helpful thing, probably the best part that came out of all that activity, was that it gave the Oriental Orthodox and the Eastern Orthodox, our own tradition, a chance to actually have a really serious conversation together, to actually meet thoughtfully on neutral ground and hear each other out. So these are, so in other words, there's the tradition to which we belong, we're accountable for. That's often, the one that comes from the Greek tradition originally, like Greek, what was taught in Greek language and then translated from there, but like the core was Greek. And then the Oriental is coming most primarily from the Syriac, Aramaic, Coptic languages, and then also very emphatically and very anciently I'm trying to remember what the right name for the language of Ethiopia is, but basically the Church of Ethiopia, also a big part of this, and flowing from the Syrian Church, Indian Orthodoxy. So all of those are a distinct heritage since, like, say, the year 500, 600, that time frame. We've talked previously about how that division occurred, so I'm not going to rehearse everything today. We don't have time for that. But basically, for the last 1,500 years or so, there's been a pretty serious schism between those two aspects of the Orthodox tradition so that they weren't understood, like each understood the other as heretical by the 20th century. That was the general understanding. Like, it was the assumption. You just like that's the Monophysite heresy. I can't remember there's a term for how they would call us. I don't remember what it is right now. But in any case, in these meetings, they had clergy and theologians going to the meetings to explain themselves to everybody, and in the process, we're hearing each other, and it's like, wait a minute, you're saying the same thing that we're saying, because and a lot of this was that they were speaking in French and English. Those were the typical languages being used for these meetings. So they're not using their own languages, right? They're having to explain it to a common audience, and so basically, what had been the hope of the ecumenical movement in the first place actually bore out here. Like, this actually worked, where in talking to each other, they actually recognized that we have our whole faith in common. There's nothing in the whole, like, we're going down the list of every topic, and there's nothing that we have as a difference. So basically, the challenge from then till now has been to actually put that into a lived reality, something that we're actually going to experience. We actually had a couple of Copts with us today visiting. It was lovely. But it's not official. It's not like something that we've all been able to get everybody on board with, because like there's like you feel like you're honoring your parents by keeping on the family feud that they had going, kind of situation. But so that's like the real success story of ecumenism as far as the Orthodox perspective. Unfortunately, in all other regards, there were like some very promising things where it seemed like, in particular, the Orthodox and Anglican, like there were some times when people were really, really hoping that was going to lead to concrete unity in the course of the 20th century. It's like there was this real excitement in the early decades of the 20th century that this was something possible. But the problem was that, and this is a general challenge with this whole activity, is that who's going to spend time at an ecumenical meeting? It's going to be people that want to spend time at an ecumenical meeting, that are the people who are most open-minded, most willing to sympathize with people and ideas that are different from their own, and they're often very, very much not representative of the fullness of their traditions. And Orthodoxy got burned by this more than once, where they were talking with one person or one group of people that were, and this was especially true among Anglicans, is that they would talk to Anglicans who would embrace everything. Like they would speak like Orthodox Christians, like in every single detail. It'd say, yep, all good. But then there would be some other statement, some other activity, some other thing that would embrace something that the Orthodox would say, wait a minute, so Anglicans just came to us and said they agree with Orthodoxy on everything. But over there, they were talking to Calvinists and saying they agree with you on everything. And it's like Calvinism and Orthodoxy, there's some big differences there. And obviously, when Calvinists and Orthodox would talk together, they would say, yes, we agree on primacy of grace and things like that. But there are other things. No, we don't agree on that understanding of predestination. We don't agree on your what you understand the nature of sin and redemption. We just have some fundamental differences there, and they're not going away. Like the more we explain, it's like the more we understand, we believe different things, and we should honor those differences. Another challenge that's become worse and worse, I feel, over time with the ecumenical movement, is that there has been a temptation to try to kind of force the issue. Like if we just like hug it out, like if we just acted like we were all united, that would bring about the unity. And so you like to, the thing that drives Orthodox Christians is when the ecumenical organizations want to have some sort of a common worship service, and it's like, we can't do that. That is like utterly contrary. Like, I think it's slowly coming around where they understand that actually this is hurting things as far as Orthodox participation. Is that like it is a scandal. It is a scandal for Orthodox Christians to do those kinds of things. So when it happens, it's really bad. It causes severe problems within Orthodoxy when we see somebody who should be setting a good example, you know, in some place where they don't belong, and it's creating all sorts of confusion, because fundamentally, you know, we said today, got to try to remember, I'm trying to remember the exact phrase, and I'm putting myself on the spot here. Let us be of one mind, that with one heart we may confess, is roughly a rough paraphrase of that. So it's like we're trying to come to one mind, one heart, that we may confess one faith. I mean, this is the language of St. Paul. He says, you know, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of us all. So if we don't actually have one faith, if we're not actually of one mind, if our hearts are divided on really what at least from our side are key issues, then we shouldn't pretend. You know, you don't pretend your way into a marriage, right? Or at least you shouldn't. You know, you first you get things in the right order. First, you establish, are you prepared to live together? Like, are you prepared to share everything in your lives together? And then you get married. And then after that, you consummate the marriage. Obviously, a lot of that gets put in the wrong order in our world, but you know, we don't agree with that either. And so it's the same kind of struggle that we have with the ecumenical movement. So basically, as the 20th century went on, the ecumenical movement in Orthodoxy got increasingly discredited. And in fact, today it's in many circles a very bad word. I myself, I have to say, as you're sort of getting from me, I try to be kind and generous about it. I don't gratuitously bash anything about it. But on the other hand, I am, as you can sort of tell, I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical that it's I think having conversations with people who are answerable, like they are the relevant party. So if a group of people are saying something like, we'd like to learn about Orthodoxy, we feel like maybe we ought to be, or maybe we think maybe we are Orthodoxy, or like Orthodoxy is our religion and we didn't realize it, and we'd like to learn more. And we've had that kind of conversation. We've had churches come to us and say, you know what, we've been doing more of our homework and it seems like Orthodoxy is actually the truth. And so could our church learn what it means to become Orthodox? Absolutely. Obviously, that someone in that position, whether it's an individual person or a whole, thousands of people all at once doing that, on board. We're also willing to collaborate in endeavors on various scales, like from the local level to national and international collaboration for needs, for charitable works and things like that. We're also willing to join together in witness in various kinds. So there have been certain kinds of protests and petitions and things like that, where churches have joined together to be a common social witness of some kind. That's happened in various cases. And that could be, again, at the level of a town, a county, a state, a nation, international affairs. We're like, trying in some way. It's very difficult because there's so many prudential matters, but in terms of like appealing for peace in the world, I mean, that is something that churches tend to try to do. So various ways that comes through. That's not quite the same thing as what is generally described as the ecumenical movement. So my church, the Orthodox Church in America, that I'm answerable to, sends representatives to the World Council of Churches. And that's done with some explicit rules on how that's supposed to happen, where the people we send are given, first of all, they're picked carefully to be people who are reliable and know their limits, and they only participate in things that they can in good conscience participate in. And they understand their job is basically to explain the Orthodox perspective on whatever the question is of the day. And they tend to only with great care sign general statements, because that's, at various times, we've naively signed things that then have been interpreted and applied in ways that weren't how we intended it. So tend to be very careful about that. So that's one example. There's also various initiatives between the Orthodox and the Roman Catholic Church. And there, it's been some fruitful aspects there. There still is one with the Anglicans. It's been harder and harder to have, given the trajectory of Anglicans theologically, it's been harder and harder to have that be fruitful, but we still feel like we have an obligation to witness. So I'm giving the general directive from our bishops in the Orthodox Church in America. Okay, I can also say that, as I've been mentioning, there's skepticism. There's skepticism to the point of some extreme factions within Orthodoxy will call it a heresy. That, I think, is absurd. That is a misunderstanding of the nature and witness of the Orthodox Church. We have nothing to fear from witnessing to other people. Again, as I said from the beginning, there's never been a point when the Orthodox Church was prepared to sell its inheritance. That's never been on offer, ever, and never will be. And so the very act of having dialogues isn't giving away anything that we must not. It's bearing witness, which is something that faithful Christians have done throughout all the centuries. And it's also a misunderstanding in the sense that there's this very narrow view of the church as we all believe that the church is the ark of salvation, that as I said at the very beginning, that the fullness of the faith is here, visibly, we don't agree with that Protestant conception. The visible boundaries of the church with authorities who are they're accountable, those people are put in position in the apostolic tradition. They are answerable to the fullness of the faith, and they are following an inheritance that goes back. They can trace back to the apostles, And so you can find something that is recognizably an Orthodox church and know what you're getting. Like that's basically, you can go anywhere in the world and have confidence that if you walk into an Orthodox church, the essential same faith and worship will be there wherever you go. But that is not the same thing as saying that God has condemned and rejected and cast into outer darkness everyone who is not within those visible boundaries. All right, that's saying something that we have not been told, and frankly, there's plenty of witness within the clear, again, looking at those clear boundaries I just mentioned. If you look at what they are with any sort of care, you can very quickly establish that some sort of idea that it's like inside this wall is all light and truth, and outside it there is none. There's not a glimmer of light that extends beyond that wall. Everyone who's outside of it is a servant of the demons, okay? Is preaching and teaching lies all day long, okay? Just to very quickly, as we're wrapping up here, to make clear why I genuinely see that as something just wrong, and to talk about it like this is like a heresy, to engage in ecumenical dialogue is a heresy. The word heretic just gets thrown around far too often. And when we look at people who are recognizable heretics in history, we look at the Arians, the Nestorians, and so on. Some of these famous groups of like the big ones, the ones that kind of set the standard of what heretics are like, those who divide the garments of Christ, who are wolves in sheep's clothing, and so on. Okay, so we're in agreement that these are false teachings, bad stuff happening. Nevertheless, if someone repents of that, and like an Arian clergy repents of that heresy and returns, we're not treating them like they are, like a witch doctor or a demon worshiper or something like that. We treat them as Christian leaders who have repented, and they're treated with care and respect, and they're not rebaptized. They're received back with penitence. So that suggests, I think, something. We could talk more. We got to stop, but just by that, you can see that there's quite a lot of room for a certain degree of charity.